Ren Shan Ren Hai. Directly translated from Mandarin, it means people mountain, people sea. But in plain English, it really means, well, that's a lot of people. And this was an ongoing joke that I had with a couple of my colleagues when I worked at the visa section at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, China. We would get to work every morning, we'd look out the window, and we would see hundreds, if not thousands, of visa applicants patiently waiting their visa interviews. These were people maybe looking to travel to the United States for a vacation, maybe looking to study at a high school or university here, or maybe looking to come here for a business meeting, or any number of other reasons. And we knew we had a daunting task ahead of us. We had to personally interview every single one of those people waiting in line before they could get a decision on their visa application, some of which they had waited months, if not years for. And we had to get through all those people before we could go home that evening. So today I want to talk a little bit about that experience. What should you expect the next time you go to a consulate or embassy to apply for your visa? What does the officer see as you approach the window? What does the officer know about your situation? And I'll leave you with a couple of tips that will hopefully put you in the best possible position for, hopefully, a good outcome at your next interview. Hi, I'm Travis. I'm a former visa officer with the U.S. State Department, where I spent almost 7 years as a career diplomat. During that time, I interviewed over 80,000 visa applicants from all over the world. So I do have a unique perspective and some expertise on how this process actually works. So let's start with the basics. Now, every U.S. diplomat, with very few exceptions, is required to do at least 1 year of visa interviews during one of their first 2 overseas assignments. That means that you may encounter a visa officer that never intended to spend their time interviewing visa applicants. Now, you also might encounter a visa officer that has chosen to do that as their career, and they're really excited to see you. Now, this is not to say that you're going to encounter somebody who's super grumpy and has no interest in talking to you at all. Because at the end of the day, the reason that almost all of us join the Foreign Service is to engage in diplomacy. It's to talk to people from other countries, from other backgrounds, and give them a glimpse of what it's like to be in the United States, to talk with an American. Because it's in those one-on-one interactions that we can break down misunderstandings and break down barriers and hopefully make the world a better place. But the flip side of that is that this job is exhausting. When I worked at the visa office in Beijing, I would interview anywhere from 150 to 250 visa applicants per day on average. And so if you think about what that means mathematically, I had between 2 and a maximum of 3 minutes per visa applicant to go through all of the key questions that I needed to ask, and then to make a very crucial decision. Now, let's be clear, this decision might be life-altering for many visa applicants. This may mean that you are able to go and study at a university in the United States, or you have to go somewhere else. It may mean that you can travel here for that crucial business meeting that's going to make or break your business. It may mean that you can travel here on that vacation that you've saved years for. And we all know that in the back of our mind, that this is a very, very heavy decision that we are about to make. And so we do want to get as much facts as possible so that we can make the best possible decision. So how does it all work? Well, first, when you get to the consulate or the embassy where you intend to apply for your visa, you generally have to present some sort of documentation at the gate. Now, in most cases, that's probably going to be your passport, and it might also be the confirmation page for your interview. Now, at the gate, you might also be asked to remove your electronic devices. You may have your bags searched, and you may actually even be required to leave your bags and other belongings outside of the property, outside of the consulate or the embassy. When I worked in Mexico, there were a couple of private businesses around the consulate where you could, for a fee, leave your belongings. But this is tip number 1. I always tell applicants that they should arrive with as few things as possible because it just makes everything easier. You're not having to go to multiple places to leave things and pick things up, and you're also not worried about the security of your belongings either. So now you've gotten through the outside gate or the front door, then you generally will go through a more rigorous security check. You'll probably go through some sort of metal detector. You'll have your bags thoroughly searched or x-rayed, and you'll again be required to remove any electronic devices and leave them behind, sometimes in a secure locker, sometimes in a basket somewhere. So again, it's generally advisable not to take something with you unless you think you absolutely need it. So now you're finally inside the visa section of the consulate or the embassy. Well, a few things are going to happen pretty quickly in the beginning. First, you're probably going to check in with a local staff member, somebody that speaks your language, probably looks just like you, and that's where you'll check in. You'll provide some documentation, and that all depends on the type of visa you're applying for, but generally, you'll put your passport under the slot in the window. You may provide the confirmation page for your interview, and that local staff member will make sure everything is correct in the system. Now, the next step is to get fingerprinted. Now, this is generally going to be a U.S. employee, a diplomat. That employee likely will speak your language, but they may not. And so be prepared for a little bit of a language barrier if you don't speak much English. But again, speaking English is not a requirement. So you get to that step, and you'll be asked to put your fingers and your thumbs on a little electronic screen where it electronically captures your fingerprints. Now, after that, generally the longer wait ensues. You may wait anywhere from just a couple of minutes to a couple of hours, depending on how busy the visa department is at that particular location. And while you're waiting in line, you probably have a lot of time to think about your interview. Hopefully you're not getting nervous because hopefully you've been prepared and hopefully you have everything in order. And that's the first place that ZF Visa and Immigration can come in. Reach out to us on our website at zfvisa.com or send us an email to info@zfvisa.com. Schedule a consultation with us and we'll take that time to meet you, to understand your circumstance. We'll ask you lots of questions about why you intend to come to the United States and maybe about your background. And then we'll work strategically with you to put together a plan and walk you through the actual interview process itself so you know exactly what to expect and you can put your best foot forward. So now you're approaching the visa officer. You've waited in probably a long line. You've gone through security. You've provided your fingerprints. This is the crucial part of the visa application, the interview itself. And so let's break down what happens here. So as you approach the window, the officer will probably already have some information about you pulled up on their screen. Now, they may have to scan a barcode on your confirmation page or maybe a sticker on the back of your passport, but quite often they'll already have some of your information available. So when you actually stand in front of the officer at the window, what does the officer know about you? Well, they know several things, actually. On their computer screen, on their monitor, the officer will obviously have a picture of you and your name, your date of birth, some key biographical data. But beyond that, the officer will have access to three crucial pieces of information. One is, have you applied for a visa before, and was that application denied or was it approved? Two is, have you applied for a visa to immigrate to the United States, to move to the United States? And this could complicate your application a little bit because, again, if you're applying for a non-immigrant visa, that means that you have to prove that you're going to come back to your place of residence outside of the United States. If you can't prove that, you'll likely be rejected or denied under what we call 214B. We have a separate video about 214B, which we'll link in the description below. But the gist of 214B means you are required to prove that you have sufficient ties outside of the United States that will compel you to return home after a short stay. In other words, you're not moving to the United States. So if you have an active immigrant visa petition, that's not an automatic disqualification by any means, but it does mean that you'll need to explain the circumstances around that application because the officer will definitely ask you. Now, the third crucial piece of information comes from your fingerprints and your photo, your passport photo that you bring with you. Now, from your photo, the computer system will run a check against many, many other photos and see if you might be somebody that is committing identity fraud, somebody that may have applied for a visa or even a passport before under a different name. And with your with your fingerprints, the officer will have a bit of a glimpse into some of your criminal history. Primarily, what might have you done while in the United States previously, but also it might include some information about what you've done outside of the United States. So if you have any degree of criminal past, you've gotten tickets, you've been arrested, do not try to hide that. This is a major, major tip for you. Be honest, be forthcoming, because chances are that's probably not going to be an outright bar against getting a visa. So be honest. If you try to hide anything, the visa officer will quickly realize that, and that will probably end up being a bar to getting a visa. So beyond this superficial kind of immediate data that's available to the officer on that screen as you approach the window, the officer will then go a little bit deeper into your details. And so they'll pull up your DS-160 form. This is the form that you fill out when you're applying for your visa and when you're scheduling your visa interview. So it has everything ranging from your name and your address and your date of birth, but it also has much more detailed information, such as what are your plans in the United States? Where will you stay? How long will you stay? What will you be doing? Are you visiting anybody? Do you have family members in the United States? And then, of course, it has a question that I always found to be a little bit funny, which is, if you were denied a visa previously, what was the reason for your denial? Well, I find that funny because quite often you're not really given a good concrete reason for a visa denial. As I mentioned earlier, the officer might say, you don't meet the requirements of 214B, and that's it. And many people don't really know what 214B means. So while it's important to be as forthcoming as possible and as truthful as possible, you may honestly not really know why you were denied last time or the time before that. And so again, that's another place that ZF Visa and Immigration can help. Reach out to us, schedule that consultation, and we'll start by helping you understand why you might have been denied in the past. We'll try to lift that veil a little bit and delve into the legal requirements for the visa that you applied for, and that might help us pinpoint the reason that you didn't qualify, or at least the visa officer thinks you didn't qualify. So the officer is going to look at all of those details, your DS-160 application form, your fingerprint history, whether you have an outstanding immigrant visa petition, your facial recognition results, everything available on that monitor, the visa officer will look through in a matter of seconds. Because again, remember, mathematically speaking, if I was doing up to 250 visa interviews a day, I had just minutes to complete an entire interview front to back. And so visa officers are really, really good at looking through all this information really, really quickly. It becomes essentially muscle memory to go through different pieces of information, focus on crucial aspects of the DS-160 form, and focus in on what might be problem areas or what might be really good signs that helps the officer come to a decision faster. So at this point, the actual conversation, the actual interview should start. Now, the officer might ask you one question. The officer might ask you 10 or more questions. And this is because the officer may have already largely made up their mind after looking through all of your data. Now, that, again, could be leading to a good decision, could be leading to a negative decision. And so this is where your responses, your clear, confident responses to the officer's questions become crucial. And that's the third place where ZF Visa and Immigration can help you. After we understand your unique circumstances, your plans to travel to the United States, we can then strategically put together a plan to help you respond confidently and, more crucially, truthfully to the visa officer's questions. Because again, if you watched our video about 214B, you're essentially guilty until proven innocent. You're assumed to not qualify for your visa, and you're assumed to be an intending immigrant to the United States until you can prove otherwise. And so you have to have a very, very good plan in place to explain your circumstances in a confident, truthful way to the visa officer to hopefully convince the officer that you're not intending to move to the United States and that you will qualify with the visa class that you're applying for. And then after just a couple of questions, the officer is probably not going to look at any of your documents because, as we explained in another video, documents can easily be forged. Even official documents like passports are commonly forged. And so as a former manager of a fraud prevention unit at a consulate in Mexico, I can tell you, I have seen every single type of document forged that you could possibly imagine. Fake documents are everywhere, and documents of any type rarely prove anything. That's really why we have a requirement in the United States to interview every visa applicant face-to-face, in person. Visa officers are specially trained to look you in the eye as you answer their questions. They're trained to spot signs of maybe less than truthful answers, hesitation, nervousness. And of course, everybody's going to be a little bit nervous at their visa interview, but nervousness from not really telling the truth, from trying to get a story across and convince somebody of something that isn't quite accurate. And that's why most visa officers will rarely rely upon documentation. They will instead rely upon how you answer their questions. So reach out to us at ZF Visa and Immigration. You can go to our website at zfvisa.com or send us an email at info@zfvisa.com. From there, you can schedule an initial consultation where we will take some time, again, to meet you, understand your circumstances. We'll delve into the visa that you're applying for, what your plans might be in the United States, and then we'll help walk you through this process. And because each visa, each applicant is so different, we'll create a strategic plan tailored to you to help you understand how you might need to respond to questions, how you might need to explain your unique circumstances, your plans in the United States, and hopefully we can get you a positive outcome. Now, to be clear, we of course do not guarantee a positive outcome because only the visa officer is actually going to make that decision. But what we will guarantee is that we will prepare you as well as possible so that when you approach that window, you're confident and you're putting your best foot forward. So reach out to us. We look forward to meeting you, and good luck in your next interview.